Welcome to this topic video on CSS Flexbox. Our learning objectives is to understand Flexbox as a layout technique based around a single line, a primary axis, you could call it. Okay. Understand properties that apply to what we're going to call the flex container versus the items we put in that container, the flex items. Understand that we have control over more than just that primary axis. We have control over how things lay out along that main or primary axis, the cross axis, and we have, in case we have wrapping, we have control over wrapping related properties. Okay. Readings and more. MDM has a decent start. Sometimes though it gets a little confusing when they start by describing things that were hard to do before Flexbox. Rather, for those of us who are learning Flexbox right now as part of our first CSS layout technique, some of that won't ring any bells. The ultimate guide, reference guide, is this complete guide to Flexbox from CSS Tricks. Very good, my reference. And if you want to have some fun at the same time and help make this stuff sink in, go play Flexbox Froggy, a free game that you help Froggy and his friends write by writing CSS code. Okay. We got some live practice files. Okay, I've got screenshots in this slide set. However, everything's better to try it live with these practice files. So that's what I'm going to be doing rather than hanging on the screenshots in the slides. I'm just going to be going over to these practice files, each of which I've opened up. Okay, the first one is from MDM. Okay, the container is a section element, so that's a moderate size flex container. Next one for me is I'm just using as my container just a paragraph element. Okay. Then the last example, I'm going to use the entire body as my flex container. And I'm going to use both main axis, cross axis, and item properties to show you some cool things you can do. And that's not even all of the cool things you can do with Flexbox. Okay, as we started to hint, Flexbox is a one-dimensional layout method, meaning we're laying out things along a line. Okay, we're allowed to choose whether it's a vertical or a horizontal line. We're allowed to choose how additional space gets filled in and all sorts of good stuff like that. Okay. A little bit more technical description from CSS Tricks gives the container. So we're going to start out by specifying the flex container, and the container is going to have the ability to alter its items width and order and how to fill up the rest of the space. It's such like that, and determine if things happen around a vertical or a horizontal axis. Okay. Why Flexbox? This is the part that if you haven't been doing CSS before, like a lot of people in my class, it won't make a lot of sense. These things were very difficult to do before Flexbox. Vertical centering of a block of content inside its parents, making all the children of a container take up an equal amount of available width height regardless of how much is available, making all columns in multi-column layout adopt the same height even if they contain different amounts of content. Really? Yeah, that was tough. Okay, so let's look at this example. Okay, a simple example. This is MDM, but let's look at the code itself. Okay, no Flexbox going on here. Okay, so here's our body. Okay, nothing terribly exciting set here. Here's the header. What do we got going on here? We got the purple. Okay, now we get to the section. Okay, the section. Okay, just a section. Font families defined. In any section, it's an article. Each one of these articles has its background color. It's got a little bit of margin, a little bit of padding. Okay, so let's go to the section. Okay, and so I'm just trying this out. I'm going to go display. Display is the property that we use to set whether or not we have flex. It's the same thing we set if we want block or inline block, but let's see what happens if I say FLE. Oh my gosh, look at this. 3 perfect columns, all of the same height, right? The background color was set on all these things. Okay. Each one, though, by just saying flex, we get 3 columns, 1 for each. Okay. And they all look nicely the same as far as height. Wow, that is sweet. Did I have to go use a CSS framework with its multi-column grid layout? No. One CSS command. Okay. To me, that's very impressive. If you haven't had to work with CSS before, never had to deal with grid systems and things like that from CSS frameworks where you had to put divs within divs within divs, it may not be impressive. But this is nice because it makes it also very easy for you to preview things. Okay. So what's going on here? Let's get used to this terminology. Okay. First of all, we're going to have the main axis and the cross axis. Okay. When we lay out items in the Flexbox, okay, they're being laid out along the main axis. So here, item 1, item 2, item 3. So the main axis here is going from left to right. This is a horizontal example. Okay. The cross axis is the axis running perpendicular to the direction of the main axis. So in this example, okay, since the main axis is left to right or horizontal, the cross axis is vertical. Okay. Basic terminology. The parent element that has display flex set on it is the flex container. The items being laid out as flexible boxes inside the flex container are called the flex items. Okay, so let's go back to this example. Section. It's down just a little bit. Okay. We're putting the flex on the section. Okay. So that's the flex container. Okay. Each article, the first, all the children, direct descendants, not what's within them, each of these articles is a flex item. Now, if I was going to be bad and cheat, I would come over here, move over my and look in my developer panel in this nice new layout feature that shows me the flex container section, okay, the flex direction row, meaning that's the main axis, and showing me all the flex items. Okay, so that's very, very helpful. This is relatively new. Okay, so when Flexbox first came out, we didn't have all this nice stuff. Okay, so we got the container and the items. The items are the direct children of the container. What the flex, whatever is in the items, different layout rules apply. You are allowed to put flex within flex within flex and stuff like that to achieve whatever kind of designs you want. Okay, so in pictures, main axis, okay, in this example is like what we just saw is a row, okay, going horizontal. Okay, that each of the items are laid out horizontally. Okay, the cross axis is vertical. Okay. Now, let's start seeing what we can adjust just from the container perspective. Okay. Display and flex direction. Okay, we use flex, display flex, okay, on the container already to enable the layout. We can use the flex direction where we can say row, row reverse, column, or column reverse. The default direction is row. Let's check that out, make sure it's true. Display flex. Let's put in a new thing in here. Okay. Sorry. Display, sorry, flex direction is row. Nothing changed. Oh, that's because that's the default. What if I say column? Oh, we haven't. Wait a second. Column layout looks just like the default when I don't have it. Okay. Can I do reverse? Let's go row reverse. Did that do anything? Oh, we were able to change the ordering. So that means the container has some control over the ordering of its children as well. Okay, so by setting flex direction, mainly between row and column, we set the main axis to be either vertical or horizontal, or row is horizontal, column is vertical. Okay. Justify content. This defines the alignment along the main axis. It helps distribute extra space, free space left over when either all the flex items on a line are inflexible or are flexible. Okay. Free space defines the alignment along the main axis when there's extra free space. Okay. Interesting. Do we have extra free space here? Doesn't quite look like it. Let's try it. Justify content. Center. Nothing happened. Start. Nothing happened. End. Nothing happened. Professor, you are a failure. Your example's not working. Go back, read it carefully. This step helps distribute extra free space left over when either all the flex items on a line are inflexible or are flexible but have reached their maximum size. There is no maximum size set on each of these articles. They are block elements. They will try and take up as much width as possible. We need a new example. Good, Professor. Okay. Let's look at an example. A teeny tiny example. Not teeny tiny in the sense of it's insignificant, but in the sense of we're not going to style a big section. We're going to come in and we're going to see, let's see, here's my nav. In this nav, I've got a paragraph. Okay. Here's the thing about the Nobel Prizes in physics, and then there's links to physics, chemistry, economics. Okay. So in this body, oops, shouldn't keep clicking, in the nav, I've got a paragraph. Oh, look at this. In this paragraph, I've set the paragraph here. Paragraphs are block items. They take up the entire width. I've set it to flex. What are the items in here? There's some text. There's a link, a link, a link. Oh, so let's take a look at the styling. Let's see, nav P. We got the font family. Look here, display flex. Okay, let's turn off display flex. Oh, it's just a bunch of items. They're all in line, right? Okay, so this is just a paragraph with some text and and 3 links. So I put display flex on it. Okay. And magic happened. No magic. Nothing happened. Oh, I set justify content for space around. Okay. Each item has a width. Okay. Based on its size. Okay. I told it to put space around each one of these things. Okay. So space around the text, space around the link. Ooh, let's try another one. Here's one that I think has a nice look if you're doing menus. How about space between? Professor, what happened? Notice, look at this. Now the first one and the last one go all the way to the edge, and the extra space is put between them. Can you show me that again slower? Let's compare space between with space around. Space around distributed the space around each one of these things. What else do we have in here? Space evenly. That looks pretty much like space around. Okay. The space between is definitely a nice look for menus and things like that. Okay. So I was able to set up with a single, two CSS properties, display and flex. Display setting to flex and the justified content. I was able to set up this nice header here with links spaced out for doing this to look very nice, professional, and by the way, it's completely adaptive. Okay. As I grow and shrink it, it puts space between those elements, or space around, depending on which setting I have. Okay. Space around. Okay. Nice and adaptive, responsive, which is probably the correct word to use. Okay. Very nice. That's okay. What's the main axis? The main axis is, by default, a row. Justify content is dealing with the space between elements along that row if the elements themselves don't change size. It didn't apply to this example because these elements are block elements, so they're as wide as they're allowed to be. They grow to be 100% of the width they're allowed. Okay. However, these elements here, these links and stuff, are only as wide as their content. Okay. Flexbox justify content. What other values? We didn't try. Okay. Let's just quickly look at a couple other values for justify content. One is, it used to be flex start, now it's just start. Not particularly useful here, it just shoves them all here. Okay. Or we can look at end, puts them all over here. Now, if we were going to use one of these things, they're not bad in the toolbar. We would just need to set some space between these guys, between these links, right? So if we can, I won't do a live demo there, okay? But it's good for that kind of justification to the side or one side or the other, okay? Very nice concept, okay? When the things have fixed sizes and there's extra space, we can use justify content, center them all. Okay, we could do that too. Okay, to put space around them or determine where that extra space goes. Okay, but notice, it doesn't apply to all cases depending on what kind of content you have. Okay, went through those. Align items. This defines the default behavior for how flex items are laid out across the cross-axis. Oh, cool. Let's try it. Okay. Let's go. Put this to nice space around. Okay. Now let's go align items. To do what they said, ooh, let's try start. Did you see that change? I didn't see that change. It changed at the end. I didn't see a change either. What's the cross axis? Oh, it's the vertical axis. Wait, all these things take the same amount of space vertically. They're all the same height, they're just text things. So you're saying, Professor, that none of these commands have any effect here? No. But let's try going over to this case. Okay. Align items. So now we're going to lay things out along the cross-axis. Let's go start. Oh, look at that. Okay. Now we said start them all and line them up here. And instead of telling them to stretch, which was the default, okay, we're telling them let's start them, and it's okay for them to be of different sizes. Can we go in? So this is the cross axis, right? They're being laid out from left to right horizontally. We're setting the properties of the cross axis, okay? We're telling it to put them at the end. Start them all at the end of this cross axis. Or the start of the cross axis. Or start them from the center them along the cross axis. Okay. Centered along the cross axis. Oh. Now, what you should choose depends on what effect you're trying to do, but I'm just showing you that you have the option to do these things, okay? So we saw that depending on your situation, sometimes the justified content doesn't really make a lot of sense. Sometimes, right, we found that justified content made no sense in this case because the things expanded their width. However, the align items make a huge amount of difference. Okay, just like here, we saw that align items made absolutely no difference, turning it off on or off, but justify content made a huge difference. Okay, so we need to know what those things are doing and know what kind of elements we have. Okay, if we looked at a sample of these, the default was stretch. Okay, we don't have anything similar like that when we do the main along the main axis. Okay. Now, what I didn't show you is I didn't show you flex wrap. Okay. What happens if we have too many things? Either we will have to start scrolling with scroll bars, or we can tell the Flexbox to wrap content onto another row or column depending on the type of the main axis direction. Okay. There's another thing that helps us control the wrapping, okay, when we have wrapping, but it has no effect when we don't have wrapping. Okay, so I didn't go through a wrapping example. Okay, it's very useful. Okay, the only thing is we had align items, we had justify content, now we have this mix of the two. Oh, that's why I go to the reference and look at the picture to remind myself of which things do which. Okay, item properties. We can reorder things by putting order and numbers on items. We can tell items how they should grow if there's more room for them. Okay. We can tell items how they should shrink if we want them to be able to shrink at all. In addition, we can set an item's width, okay, or its default size, okay, before the extra space is distributed. A lot of cool techniques you can do with these, okay, but we're not going to go into that. Align self aligns the default alignment one or more elements to be overridden. Huh, Professor? We're going to see that in a second. Okay. Professor, you said we could do things vertically. Everything you've done has been laid along with the main axis has been horizontal. Yep, it has been. Let's look at vertical layout. Okay. So let's say I want to center elements horizontally. Okay. So here's my example. I want to center elements horizontally. I want to set the nav near the top and the footer at the bottom with extra space in between. Here's a critical tip. Okay. I was trying to do this example and I could not get it to work. It wouldn't do what I wanted to work. If you want to do vertical spacing, okay, like we did with justify content in the horizontal direction, you must set a height property on the flex container. I know. They put that in a footnote somewhere. It's critical. Otherwise, this example won't work, and we'll show you that by turning it on and off, that value. Okay. So here's my HTML page, the HTML for my page. Let's see what it looks like. This is how it looks like when it's completed. Okay. Let's see how it was done. Okay. So first of all, what was I supposed to do? Okay, center elements horizontally. Okay, some or all. Okay, so this is, okay. Let me turn off the Flexbox over here. Okay, I put flex on the body, the entire body. Okay, let's turn that off. Okay, that's what it looks like. Okay, notice there's no centering except for this, I think, has text align set to center. I don't remember what I did there. Okay, so there's no centering going on except this text alignment in the footer. Okay. All right. There's definitely no vertical space distribution. It's just doing a straight standard static layout. Okay, blocks are laid out from top to bottom. Here's a block, here's a block, here's a block. Okay. Let's use Flexbox for centering. Notice we're going to set the flex direction to column. That means a vertical column, okay, a vertical main axis. And we're going to align the items, which means how we do things around the cross axis. Oops, sorry. We're going to align the items center. Okay. So, display flex, align items center. Okay. So if I turn off align item center, oops, I got to turn off the height too. Okay. Now this is laid out. Okay. So we have flex set, but it's really not doing anything for us. Now if I set align item center, things center around the principal axis, the main axis. Except for this guy over here. What's his problem? What's the nav's problem? The nav's problem is, oh, he's got align self set to start. If I turn that off, everybody gets aligned center, okay, respect to the main axis. Okay, but we said items can override that. So here, we're going to tell the item, okay, that he's allowed to be at the start. Okay, what if I set this to end? I can move them over to this side. Okay, what should you choose? You're the designer. I'm just showing you how to do it. Okay, play Flexbox Froggy. They'll show you these things too. Okay, so we have these choices. How we want to lay them out. That's a design graphic art decision. Okay. Now what else would we say? Okay. So flex for centering. So we centered things. Vertical spacing. We're going to say justify content, and we're going to use space between. Okay. So here we are. We're going to go back to body. Okay. Justify content. Space between. I turn on and off space between. Nothing happens. Why? Because no height is set. Now I set the height. Okay. Great, Professor. It's not, oh. Look at this. The extra space is now going in between. Let's see if we can make this more extreme. What am I doing? I'm just shrinking things a bit. Look at all this extra space. Okay. I'm going to let this get a little flexible here and do the, see where the extra space is? It's in between the elements. Hey, Professor, didn't we have something like space around? Space around. Oh, look, there's extra space above the nav and below the nav. Now, and below the footer. That's really not the effect I wanted. I really want space between. Okay. So that puts this at the top and this at the bottom. Okay. Notice the adaptive nature, the responsive nature of this. Okay. The trick, like I said before, is if the container doesn't have a height set on it, Flex doesn't know how to distribute this extra vertical space. Okay. Hence, I needed that extra property. Finally, adjusting the nav back to the left or the right, okay, we use a property on the nav itself, align self, start, okay, its alignment. So let's go back to the nav itself. Right now we have it at end. We can turn off the alignment, its own. Okay, that's the default. It inherits from the container. If we turn back on the alignment, set it to start, it'll come over. Let's make this back to normal size, so not you. You over here. Okay. And this is just the beginning. Okay. We didn't get into the shrinking properties or the growing properties. We didn't even look at wrap. But you can see how nice we can use, how easy it is to lay out items within Flex containers. Okay. From now on, well, after we see grid, we'll never have to have ugly looking forms and sets of controls because we're just going to apply Flex or grid or combinations of these things for nice, reasonable looking layouts. Okay. So that's an introduction to Flexbox. Okay. Here's the final CSS. Well, part of the final CSS with comments saying, hey, this is how I set the vertical space between because our flex direction is column. We need the height. If we don't set the height, we won't see the effect of that. Okay. Here's overriding the container centering by setting align self start, etc. Okay. So we've got 3 different examples here showing subpieces like a section as the container, just a paragraph as a container, and the whole body as a container, and using Flexbox to lay out in all those situations. Yes, you can use containers within containers within containers if you've got a need for it, which sometimes is very handy when laying out controls within boxes that are laid out in all sorts of ways.